All right, we'd like to call Congressman Castro for her interpellation.
Long last. At long last, Mr. Chair. Ay, follow up ko lang, Mr. Chair, no? Hindi lang po yung kay Chairman Palpalatok yung mga ni-request niya from the PNP no station, pati po yung kay Attorney Crissy. Attorney Crissy, di ba, you have sinabi mo rin na nag-request kayo sa mga police station noong mga report or incident report kung ano man yung nangyayari. Mga ilan po yun?
Yes, Your Honor. Well, I think I mentioned in particular to the case we are litigating right now in Caloocan, we tried to have the documents authenticated. We went to Caloocan, Sangandaan, and then the station in Larangay. All of these offices even refused to accept the letter request, saying that those who signed had already left the agencies.
Yes, pwede ba natin kuhanan ng Mr. Chair, ng written na document kung bakit hindi inaano yung request? Hindi sinasagot yung request.
Kanino?
Yung po sa ni-request
Yes.
ni
We'll submit the
Attorney.
letter, Your Honor,
Yes,
but
please.
again, it was not even received.
Okay.
Okay.
Not even received.
Yes, Your Honor, because they said, wala naman dito nila yung pumirma dyan eh. So, hindi na sa amin yan.
Kasi nakikita natin, Mr. Chair, dun sa discussion natin noong EO2 ni dating Presidente Duterte, parang talagang sinelyuhan niya na, no, yung investigation na hindi talaga mag-pursue ang any investigation because of this. Ito, no, yung number 3 na exception. Okay? So, wala talaga, hindi talaga magpo-proceed. Kaya talagang mapipilitan ang pamilya na pumunta talaga sa ICC. Unless, Mr. Chair, ma-revoke talaga itong EO102, EO2, no, na nakalagay kasi dito, no, yung mga exception, no, investigation records complied for law enforcement purposes or information which is written would be contained in such records. So kahit na anong records, kahit na sino man po yung mag-imbestiga, kahit na yung ICC, because of this, EO2 ay walang mapuproceed na hustisya at pag-iimbestiga. Kaya nga, no wonder, Mr. Chair, yung ating mga kapulisan, very complacent, no? Wala na silang pakialam whether maimbestigahan yan o hindi. Imagine mo, in 2016 up to now, 52 cases lang yung naimbestigahan, 4 yung o 3 yung mga na-prosecute. How about itong na to, 6,200 plus? Statistics na lang ba ito, Mr. Chair? So kaya talagang in my conclusion talaga, hanggat hindi ito na-repeal ni President Marcos Jr. na siya talagang dapat na mag-repeal nito, ay walang mapuproceed talaga na investigation at hindi talaga makakakuha ng hustisya yung ating mga victims, no, ng extrajudicial killings during the war on drugs ni dating Presidente Duterte, Mr. Chair. So, kaya tama po ba ako? Kunin ko lang yung idea ni former Secretary Jevara at saka si Attorney Neri, Mr. Chair.
So, Sergeant Guevara, can you please reply on that?
More specifically, Your Honor, on the removal of that particular exception?
Yes, oo. Baka dapat, Mr. Chair, mapag-aralan talaga natin yung EO. Kasi itong particular na exception na ito, hanggat nandiyan yan, lagi na lang sasabihin sa atin ng police, kung manghihingi tayo ng records, ay exemption, accepted, kasama yan sa exemption ng FOI. So, tingin nyo, dapat tanggalin natin
Possible
yan.
po yan na ma-consider for removal. Kasi yung ibang exceptions naman po, Your Honor, we're actually based on existing laws and jurisprudence. Kaya po yung sa pag-consolidate ng mga exceptions to the FOI ay talagang may pinagbasihan naman po yan. Pero yun hong particular exception na yun na access to records of ongoing investigations by the police, I am not too sure kung yan po ay nakabatay sa isang particular na existing law or jurisprudential rule. Kaya po this may be a good subject for possible reconsideration.
Yes, thank you,
So Jen,
Soljen.
your thought about this, no? Can we write the president a letter recommending for the removal of EO2?
Sa amin po ba manggagaling
For
sa
example,
OSG?
sa amin, yung
Sa
letter
inyo po?
namin, yes.
Oh, definitely you can do that, sir.
Would you recommend?
It's the prerogative of the Congress po, and we may be consulted about it as a matter of fact. So I am not in a position to
Anyway,
commit
you're
at
the
any
soldier
time.
now of the present
Exactly.
administration.
That's why that may be referred to us or to the DOJ for opinion. So let's cross the bridge when we get there, Your Honor. Thank you.
Neri, will you please reply for the query and the question of Congresswoman Castro?
Mr. Chair, if I may, just a quick interjection.
Okay.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, the executive number 2 signed by the former president way back in 2016 actually states that the Department of Justice and the Office of the Solicitor General are hereby directed to prepare an inventory of such exemptions and submit the same to the Office of the President within 30 days. Our current Solgen, Mr. Chair, was the former Secretary of Justice. May I inquire from the Honorable Maynard Guevara, Mr. Chair, if he was indeed, or his office was indeed, part of crafting the exceptions?
Yes, that is correct, Your Honor. The DOJ then was involved in identifying what provisions under existing laws or what jurisprudential doctrines may be invoked or may be a basis for formulating the exceptions.
So in other words, Mr. Chair, the concern of the Honorable Castro can best be answered by our current Solgen, who was the former Secretary of Justice. Kasi yung pinag-uusapan dito tama ba ito? Ito ba ay kasama dun sa exceptions? But earlier, Solgen Maynard Guevara mentioned na malamang mukhang hindi yan dapat. So there's a problem. That's why I'm confused, because actually the exceptions, Mr. Chair, came from his office during the previous administration. In other words, the exceptions carried in Executive Order number 2 came from the former Secretary of Justice, who is now the current Solgen. So malamang, sir, you can actually inform us whether this exception that is being cited by the current PNP, the Chief of Police, is indeed an exception to Executive Order number 2, which was signed by the former president, which actually dictates your former office to have crafted the basis of all these exceptions.
Your Honor, we submitted what we believe were covered by existing laws and jurisprudential doctrines. But
So, Mr.
the
Chair,
finalization
yeah,
of
but
that
Mr. Chair, if
executive
I may,
order
if
was
I may,
not ours.
yeah, if I may, you mentioned you submitted. Among the basis for exceptions that you submitted, alin po doon ang na-carry?
There are quite a number
Quite a
of
number.
the exceptions
So-
because they're actually founded on existing laws.
So the issue at hand that's being cited with regards to this alleged extrajudicial killings, was it part of the exception that you submitted or hindi?
That I would not remember, Your Honor, because as I mentioned earlier, while we submitted what we drew from existing legislation and jurisprudential doctrines, the finalization of the executive order was done by Malacanang itself.
yeah, but you did had a copy of that.
Yes, Your Honor, we
Yeah.
had a copy.
So you know which ones were carried and which ones were not carried.
Some would be policy matters, in my
But
opinion.
did they carry an exception that was not within the context of what you recommended?
Unless I am able to review the entire executive
Yeah.
order,
So, Mr.
I will
Chair,
not be in a position
maybe
to answer
request
that.
the Solgen to review, because Executive Order number 2 categorically states, if I may, Section 4 exception, the Department of Justice is hereby directed to prepare an inventory of such exceptions and submit to the office of the President. In other words, lahat ng mga exception na ito ay nanggaling po sa iyo, sir, nung ikaw ay Secretary of Justice.
Not necessarily, Your Honor.
So who recommended the other
That
exceptions?
I am not sure because the finalization was not done by the DOJ. We submitted what we were in our position to research and submit to Malacanang.
Mr. Chair, if I may, the finalization was made by the office of the President. That is correct because it's an executive order. And that's why, Mr. Chair, if I may, in the next hearing, may I move that the former executive secretary be invited.
We will, COMSEC, will please take note of that.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Pero balikan ko lang, no?
The thing is, before you have any word yet, Congresswoman Perrin, precisely why I said, what is your thought about this committee writing a letter to the President to scrap EO2? Because being an executive order, pwede Malacanang, therefore, the Congress cannot do anything about it. That Malacanang should scrap it if
But Mr. Chair, if
Diba?
I may, pasensya na po, balikan po natin yung sinabi ko kanina. Nakasaad sa executive order na ang magre-recommend na mga exception na ito ay ang Secretary of Justice, who
Okay.
during that time was Secretary Jevara. Ngayon, ang sinasabi ni Secretary Jevara, hindi niya matandaan alin yung na-carry o alin yung hindi. But the point here is not what was not carried. The point here is that all those exceptions came from your office because the executive order is very clear. You were the official or your office was the one who will recommend exceptions to Executive Order number 2. That's why, Mr. Chair, I'm asking this just for clarity kasi baka mahirap kasing maikot ito. Because the basis of all those exceptions, specifically the legal basis of all those exceptions, actually emanated from Secretary Jevara. So he can now enlighten us whether those exceptions ay nasamahan ba ng hindi dapat, kailangan bang tanggalin yung iba doon, or were there directives to include something that was not supposed to be included, or, Mr. Chair, more importantly, baka naman ginagamit yung Executive Order number 2 to cite a reason which is non-existent in the first place.
Your Honor, I have already clarified na ang ibinigay ng DOJ ay yun lang back up by existing laws and jurisprudence. Now, I would like to believe na in the crafting of the final crafting of EO number 2, baka merong mga policy considerations that were taken into account. Kasi at the time,
So, Mr. Chair,
kaya
Your
po
Honor,
ginawa
other
yung
offices
EO
can
number
actually...
2
No,
ay
just a
dahil wala
question,
pa
Mr.
pong-
Chair, with
sorry.
due courtesy, no? So, merong mga ibang nagpasok. Despite the fact that the executive order says it's the Secretary of Justice who will give a list of exceptions, ibig sabihin merong ibang opisina na nakialam, which is actually contrary to Executive Order number 2.
As you correctly pointed out, it was the Department of Justice and the Office of the Solicitor General who were requested to provide input. At that time, I was the Secretary of Justice, but I was not the Solicitor General. So it is possible, Your Honor, that it may also have come from the OSG or from other government agencies na nag-volunteer to submit
So for the
recommendations
particular-
for exceptions.
For the particular point of concern, Mr. Chair, of the Honorable Castro and earlier of the other colleagues and the other resource person, hindi po ito nanggaling sa Secretary of Justice.
I cannot recall exactly, Your Honor, pardon me, but we'll have to refer back to our record to find out exactly what were submitted by the Department of Justice
Yes.
and the corresponding legal basis for such recommendation. I apologize that I cannot give a very categorical answer to what is a legal basis for that particular exclusion. It seems to me that it's more of a policy consideration rather than an actual legal prohibition or exception.
So in other words, Mr. Chair, kaya po yan na itanong because Executive Order number 2 has been pictured as an obstacle to all these investigations. Now we want to be clear, una, Tama ba yung pag-cite ng Executive Order number 2? Or baka pangalawa, ginagamit kunyari yung Executive Order number 2 pero hindi naman pala siya dapat gamitin sa ganyang mga bagay. Basically, that's my only concern, of course, with due respect to Secretary Jevara. So, Mr. Chair, allow me to expand my motion that for the next hearing, we also invite the former Solgen para maliwanagan, because if the DOJ Secretary and the former Solgen says and the former ES says that is not the context of Executive Order number 2, then we don't have a problem. Then the current president does not have to reverse anything. Kasi baka mamaya, hinihingi natin yung mga bagay na hindi naman pala nasa kamay ng ating presidente ngayon, kundi nasa kamay ng pag-interpret ng isang executive order. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, as
I
we want
second.
to invite the former Soldier, I think he is incapacitated right now. Am I right?
I have no personal knowledge about that, Your Honor.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Your motion is clarification, Mr. Chair. Yung motion ni Representative Garin is to invite
Is
the
to invite the former Solgen and the former
EA.
Secretary of Justice.
Ah.
The former ES,
ES.
which is Midaldea. No? Okay. Palagay ko, we will try with the Solgen, former Solgen, because I think he's kind of incapacitated now. But we'll try that. Perhaps he could be able to send his deputy to come and explain that.
Or
To
Mr. Chair,
Attorney-
baka by Zoom. I'm not really privy about Solgen Galing, baka by Zoom. Basically, the context here, Mr. Chair, kanina pa kasi natin naririnig na hindi nagmo-move forward yung investigasyon dahil sa Executive Order number 2. We went further in saying that it was in the hands now of the current president to amend that. Pero balikan po natin, baka naman yung pag-cite ng Executive Order number 2 is not actually in order. And we will get that information from the hands who crafted and contributed to the execution and formulation of Executive Order number 2.
Your Honor, if I may say something about that.
Yes.
There were times that the Department of Justice requested also certain information from the Philippine National Police. And in those situations, we were confronted with likewise a reluctance to provide information, but it was never Executive Order number 2 that was invoked by the PNP. It was the Data Privacy Law that was invoked by the PNP in somehow refusing, if not outrightly declining to provide information. Of course, we disagree with that because it's another government agency conducting an investigation which is asking for that information. But just to clarify your point, Your Honor, that it has never been the reason of the PNP to invoke EO number 2 in refusing to provide information. It was never mentioned to us. It was all about the Data Privacy Law. That was the main reason for their reluctance in providing information.
Yes, Tony Conti.
Mr. Chair, if I may just raise for the information of the body that the concept of confidentiality of drug war records has been subject of a Supreme Court case, Your Honor, the Almora case, GR number 234359. This was a question 2018, and I believe it would involve one of our resource persons today. Then Director General Albayalde refused to release records about the drug war on the basis of, and this is actually number 2 of EO2, MC Memorandum Circular number 15. Although, I mean, yes, to be precise about it, the EO itself, which is the regime of freedom of information, and the exceptions were not specifically stated, but the concept or principle of national security was raised in the case. Initially, the police refused to release the documents because they said that these documents involve state secrets affecting national security. Fortunately, the Supreme Court ruled otherwise. And therefore, I believe there has been about 7,000 case records or incidents released to counsels in the case of Almora, and are in possession of some groups already, Your Honor.
Would General Abealde please reply to the statement of Attorney Conti?
Well, as stated, Mr. Chairman, the information was already shared after the Supreme Court ruling. So, kung meron pong specifically order coming from the courts, then definitely yung PNP po magbibigay ng ano yan, ng documents.
So, Attorney Neri, there's no more need for the EO2, di ba?
I think so, Mr. Chair. In fact,
Therefore, it should be scrapped.
Yes, Mr.
Because
Chair.
that will only be used.
Yes,
Diba?
in fact, it was used with the CHR. It may not have been used with the DOJ, but it was used with the CHR.
If we may request with this committee for the President to scrap the EO2, perhaps the recommendation of Sergeant Jevara would strengthen our no.
Yes. Actually, Mr. Chair, if I may, the Constitution is very clear. Freedom of information and access to all citizens, unless upon limitation by law. There's no law that limits it. So if there's an executive order, so dapat ang
Anyway, we
in
have
favor
a
of
law already to make that a basis, di ba? Rather than the EO2.
what law, Mr. Chair? Wala, EO lang to, Mr.
Wala.
Chair.
Okay.
Your Honor, that is why early on during the Duterte administration, that matter of freedom of information by way of an executive order was immediately conceived, because we were hoping that Congress would immediately enact the a sort of the freedom of information law. But
For your information, Secretary Guevara, that almost became a law.
yes, I know.
During my time,
Opo.
but I was the one that sponsored it. in the
Yeah,
floor.
right. Yes. Kaya po inunahan na po namin, at least with respect to the executive department, kasi ganun naman po yung binibigay na importansya ng administration sa freedom of information. Kaya number 2 kagad yung EO na yon eh. Kaya nga lamang po ang coverage niya ay sa executive department lamang, kaya by executive order, dahil hinihintay po namin yung batas ng Kongreso.
Well, Mr. Chair, yung iba kasi matanong ko natanong na, yun ang pinakamahalagang point ko po. In aid of legislation, mas-scrap talaga itong EO na ito, kasi nakikita ko rin, hindi lang sa war on drugs and other crimes. Kasi kung mananatili itong EO na ito na hindi makaka-access, kung hindi gumagana yung mga pulis, hindi gumagana yung ating korte, so walang pupuntahan yung ating mga kababayan na nagsisik ng justice kung nandito itong provision na ito o kung mali man yung interpretation ng mga pulis or kung sino man. Kaya talagang dapat na maalis to, Mr. Chair. So, yun lang po. Mr. Chair, yun lang yung aking mahalagang
Okay.
question.
Salamat po. Yes, General.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, sir. Again, good afternoon. On the part of the PNP, sir, I just would like to inform this august body that sometimes August 2017, the DIDM have issued a memorandum regarding these matters when it comes to providing documents as well as informations, and specific in the title is providing such to the Commission on Human Rights. And following month, our office, the PNP Human Rights Affairs Office, issued another advisory. And I think through our office again, we will issue another advisory regarding this matter. Meron na po yan, sir, existing. And I would like also to take this advantage to inform this august body that our office, the PNP HRAW, is already trying its best to remedy this. Actually, we have an ceremonial signing for the MOU between the CHR last year regarding data sharing, sir. And we will be having another one because of the changes in the PNP leadership. Our legal office as well as the legal division of the CHR have already come up and reviewed the MOU, and now it's within the office of the PNP to address all these matters regarding data sharing.
Yeah, I believe
you,
that General, your office could be able to work in tandem with the CHR on this.
We've been, sir. That's why we have the MOU, Mr. Chair.
MOU signing.
Yes, sir.
What-
We will be.
What is the?
It's all
what is
about
in
data
the
sharing, Mr. Chair.
MOU? The sharing of information. Andun ba yun?
No, Mr. Chair, earlier, the good officer mentioned guidelines. There are existing, pasensya na po, yung kanina nasabi mo, there are existing guidelines or?
Yes, sir. The DIDM, upon research a while ago, August 22, or basta that's August
What
2017.
does the memo contain?
The title of the memo is about the providing informations, data, especially for the Commission on Human Rights.
In other words, wala nang humaharang para i-share nyo ang mga dokumento at impormasyon na ito sa Commission on Human Rights. Tama?
Supposedly, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Chair, with that, may we request the good resource person to furnish this committee a copy of those memorandums as mentioned earlier, Mr. Chair. So
Yes, Mr. Chair. We will
Can
do
you
so.
do that? You do that. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Congressman Ako.
I would just like to take advantage of the presence of our Solicitor General. Executive Order number 2 says that one of the exceptions would be all information that would compromise law enforcement operations. Could you please define the jurisdiction of this exception, sir?
It seems to me that it's a catch-all phrase, Your Honor. As I said, I believe that EO number 2 contained certain exceptions, not only those that are based on actually existing laws and jurisprudence, but might have also included some policy considerations. So if that statement says an exception or an exclusion regarding information that, if revealed, may compromise an ongoing investigation, I believe that in effect that's a policy consideration, Your Honor, and whether it is something that is reasonable or not, probably in the opinion of the Executive Department, that is a reasonable exception if divulging vital information would compromise an existing investigation, especially if it's a major one. But if it's something that may, for some people, pose as a violation of their right to information, then probably only the courts may say whether such an exception is acceptable or not from a legal standpoint.